Well, when I heard about these stories, especially the U.S. immigration system, about my experience of immigration, I obtained a visa thanks to a DS 2019 document issued by the Yale offices, and it's just go. It's super easy, and I'm not a wealthy wage person. This is a very $25 billion endowed institution, so they know that if Yale says yes, let's go, you go. So you can see the huge gap between who's the sponsor, who's giving the key, and if it's Yale or Princeton or Harvard or MIT, that's an easy game. So I would like to open the Q&A and let the audience.
Probably got a list of questions for all of you, but and thank all of you too. I mean, you're all doing remarkable work on the front line of human vulnerability, working with the most marginalised and vulnerable people. So I applaud and encourage you, and I just want to acknowledge it on behalf of humanity. Christina, you mentioned one word that I guess I want to clarify. In some of the immigration detention centres, there's an option, but you said that you can do voluntary work, and that's where you get paid minimum wage, I think it's $1 an hour or $1 a day, something, $1 a day. What part of that's not voluntary? It's propping up that sort of phony economy. Is it voluntary or is it forced labour?
It's forced labour. If you do not volunteer to do it, the detention officers might beat you. So, there's threats of violence, and it's really not a voluntary system, much like the prison system. You could opt not to work, but then you wouldn't have toilet paper. Like, you have to buy that when you're incarcerated. So, you're given like a roll or something to last a month. It's not enough. So you're forced to work in a way that's not forced to fall directly into that definition of slavery. And so it's a little bit of an end run, but not a really good one.
Okay. So it's voluntary.
I think you were really good. Under human trafficking definition, it would be coercion, right?
Coercion, absolutely. Yes.
A really good example about that. In Texas, the water tastes like sulfur. So they sell bottles of water, but the moms, they cost $2. And you have to work for a day to get 3. So the moms were telling us that they work to buy water to their kids.
Wow.
I study migration, so this has been absolutely fascinating to me. And I learned so much from some of you on the legal side of it. I was going to ask, and I think any of you would be qualified to answer this, but to what extent do you think that the increasingly restrictive migration regime in the US, has that pushed people into more desperate forms of migration, going into things like trafficking, or going into kind of more, you spoke about the TV set as well, but people also not wanting to seek that. So I'm just interested to what extent it's kind of pushed people into these more precarious forms of migration, of trafficking.
So I think that these lovely ladies, honestly, it sounds like they have a lot more on the ground work with trafficking, but I think just as a general principle, yes, I think it's absolutely having an impact. Because you have people fleeing desperate situations, right? So somebody who is seeking asylum here, probably fleeing horrible violence, death threats, maybe family, friends have been killed. They fear that they will, at the very least, be severely hurt if they return. So if they are no longer maybe able to go through the channel that was available before, they're still going to find a way to get here. And yes, that desperation may mean, paying a coyote who's going to bring them up, but ultimately they're going to be trafficked along the way. And I think that for folks who are already here, One thing that's really concerning is the amount of fraudulent immigration legal services that are out there. So individuals who hold themselves out to be attorneys or receive notario. So in the Spanish language, notario, and in many cultures, that usually encompasses somebody who is similar to an attorney who can practice law. But here, it basically comes out to a notary public who cannot practice law, but people know that, and they seize on that, and so they hold themselves out to be notarios, knowing that individuals from Central American countries might come to them thinking they're an attorney, but they actually can't do anything for them. But they'll have their prices so low so that that's where people are gravitating towards, because the cost is a huge barrier to getting representation in any context, but certainly in immigration. So I think that's another thing that we see. You know, I have personally worked with so many clients who come to me with a stack full of papers, you know, a petition that was filed for them for something that they are not eligible for. And, you know, I try to look this person up to see what firm they're with, and it doesn't exist, right? So I absolutely think that there's been an impact, and it's horrific because these are already people fleeing desperate situations and who are already extremely vulnerable. And I think many of the policies that we've seen in this country are just, you know, victimizing them even more.
I think that Franz Kafka would be very envious because his books look like children's books compared with what you guys are seeing in the courts and in the jails. And I'm a psychotherapist, and I try to look at human motivation, and the only thing I can think of here is sadism. Not so much, you know, the legal or the economic or the political, but just sheer sadism. And I'm just wondering how that concept of people just wanting to be cruel to others, it's just one toilet paper. I mean, who decided on that, and what did they look like when they looked on each other and made that decision? I mean, what is going on here psychologically and in the heart and soul? Could you comment on the human dimension of these policies?
Well, I think it goes back to the social construction of race and what racism was meant to justify. So I do think it is money, and you know, in order to get wealth and power, you have to, well, the idea is that you have to dehumanize others, because it's this idea that we have scarcity, and if they have, then I don't, and so I have to make them an other and treat them worse and worse in order to justify my own wealth and power. And I think it's really this colonial construct that we're still living under that's motivating it. But that's my view.
And the thing is that they can do pretty much what they want. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights tried to go into the Texas detention facility, and they were denied access. And also, no, we're talking detention facilities. They are not detention facilities. They have a huge sign that says residential center. But to get inside, it's harder to get inside there than at Dodge detention facility. And nobody gets called by name, everybody gets called by number. Mom and Julie gets it together. It is a detention. But I think that they pretty much can do. I believe that for the longest time, they didn't even have the state license to operate, and they still were able to operate. So I think they pretty much agree. Whatever.
Thanks. Thank you so much, except for leaving yet again. I don't know how I can contribute, but I would like to bring up two thoughts. One has to do a little with Steve's question about sadism. I was wondering about the concept of randomness. And I'm connecting to something that Daniele said. I am also an immigrant or whatever, and I've had such an easy time. Is the university signed for me? Not yet, but still, the minute you go that way. But now that I'm thinking of applying for citizenship, people are telling me to be careful. I'm signed on too many pieces of paper that are anti-government or whatever, so I should be careful. And what we have been hearing is that the whole immigration process has become more randomized. Now, I think, Keighly, I think I'm speaking to what you said about what has happened in the past 2 years or 3 years. Is it really a policy difference, or is it that the politics, not the policies, the politics have a certain influence on what the people on the ground do? The immigration officers, the one who just has to sign something. And the problem here is randomness. If somebody nice, it'll work. If it's somebody not as nice, you get thrown into jail. The racism, I think, goes with that too. You know, some are racist, some are not. So I'm wondering if this is something that it's harder for us to pinpoint, rather than a real process or a real procedure that's legally grounded. And my second thought has to do a little with what we were talking about in the roundtable before. And that is that in Israel we have a big problem with what they call foreign workers. They came from Sudan and Eritrea. We don't have a constitution. There are crazy laws to go by. And about a year and a half ago, the Ministry of the Interior decided they were kicking them all out, all the foreign workers. And people went to the streets and protested. And the ministry just said, okay, we didn't mean it. It doesn't mean that they're not doing terrible things now, but it was really interesting how the country went out, again, it's the left wing rather than the right wing, or it's the progressive rather than the conservatives, whatever. But there was an outcry of such volume that the ministry said, oh, we won't keep them out, it's okay. So it was a question of protest, a real protest that seemed to do something for a while. It's not, you know, I'm sure it's going to, we will be regressing soon, but there was a feeling that something that you did on the ground could really change things.
So I would love to speak to your question about the randomness versus the intentionality, and honestly, I think it's a mix of both, right? So there are absolutely 100% policies that are made public, and then policies that are not made public, and that we kind of see trends and things, and we hear rumors, and we can put things together. But especially when we look at some of the ones that are public, you definitely can see some intentionality there. So for instance, a lot of what has been done is disproportionately impacting Central American asylum seekers, right? So we talked about the metering that's at the border, and also the migrant protection protocols, or as many advocates prefer, the migrant persecution protocols, i.e. return to Mexico. That was targeting, so that was also the that in conjunction with the two asylum bans, as they're called. So the first asylum ban was saying that if you come and you enter between an official port of entry, that you're not eligible for asylum, completely in violation of our own asylum laws as well as international laws. And then the second asylum ban being the third country, the safe third country policy, saying that if you cross through, if you come up through the southern border, and if you cross through any countries on your way here, and you fail to ask for protection there, you're not eligible for protection here, which of course makes no sense because, you know, many of my clients are fleeing El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico and seeking asylum from those countries. So I don't really understand how on earth we can tell people to seek protection there. So in any case, those policies, you know, you see those targeted at the asylum seekers coming in through the southern border. And of course, it's not strictly limited to those from Central and South America, but that is a vast majority. But you have a whole other host of asylum seekers. For instance, I work in Bridgeport, and there's a very large Congolese population there, and I represent many asylum seekers from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And all of them, I think every single one of my clients from DRC came in on usually a visitor visa, some, you know, a B1 or B2, and then once they were here, they asked for asylum. So you have those asylum seekers who are not coming in through the southern border, and yet they are not being affected by those policies. Similarly, some of the changes in law, so there were two big legal decisions, one by former AG Jeff Sessions and then one by current AG Barr. The first was last summer, it's called Matter of AB, and I don't know if you guys heard about that. That was the decision that was purported to basically kind of get rid of asylum for people who were fleeing domestic violence. And that it also targeted asylum cases based on gang violence. And a vast majority of the cases, the asylum cases we see out of Central America, are based on intimate partner violence and gang violence. And then there was another decision this year called Matter of LEA, targeting asylum claims based on family membership, and talking specifically about how just the nuclear family outside of some clan sort of structure, right, which we don't see in the Central American countries, nuclear family alone, that's not going to be a reason to say that, you know, you can get asylum because they're targeting my family together. So that also was something that we saw as targeting those claims in particular. And then on another end, with the public charge rule, that luckily, we'll see how it goes, is currently on hold for now, thank you, federal litigation. But that essentially boiled down to the merits system that President Trump has been touting and saying that he wants for so long, because you have that, you know, prioritizing factors like wealth, if you have a certain income level, if you speak English, if you have a skill set, if you're able to pay for private health care, right? Those are all positive factors that are going to increase your chance to get a green card. So those things I think are very targeted, but I agree with you that there is a level of randomness as well, and one of the best examples I can think of is the asylum decisions and the way that the law is applied in our immigration courts. It is insane. If you go to TRAC, so the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse out of Syracuse, they put together incredible statistics, including the denial and approval rates by judge, by immigration court. And you'll see that in Atlanta, right, the majority of the judges there deny cases in the 90%, right? A lot of them more than 95% of the time. Compare that to New York City, where I think the highest denial rate is in the 60s, where the vast majority of the judges are approving cases 80%, 90% of the time. And that's, I think, a level of randomness, you know, the luck of the draw, where you end up kind of landing once you cross that border and hopefully get released from a detention center, where you just happen to end up, and that can truly make a difference in whether or not your claim is granted. So I think it's a little bit of both. Neither good.
I had a thought on Christina's presentation, and starting with the two figures that you had, $150 billion profit and 45 million slaves, $3,000 per person per year is the profit. And presumably that profit is the difference between what I can get for the services of a person and what I would have to pay if I hired an ordinary person who is legally in the country and so on. And so the first thought on that is that the law here acts as an enforcer of crime. I think that's a very interesting thought, right? That these traffickers are relying on the legal system and officials and bureaucrats and our democratic legal order as a deterrent to keep the people in thrall that they are controlling. And so we should be doubly reluctant, because it's not just that we are not helping them, but it is that we are actively helping the traffickers keep these people under control. The second question is, how can we try to do something about this problem? So what is the right way forward, right? Is the right way forward increasing penalties for traffickers or for people to hold others in slavery? Is the way forward to say that anybody who is illegally, undocumentedly, I should say, in the country, should be allowed to come forward and should pretty automatically get citizenship? Or what is the thing that you think is the best way of attacking the problem, and what kind of political demand can we make in order to stop being complicit in this enslavement?
Yeah, it's a really powerful observation. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about prison abolition, and basically what I think we can do is decriminalize, because our criminal legal system is bad. It does not helpful. Anyone going into it doesn't help anybody except the private prisons. It really doesn't help the taxpayer, it doesn't help the poor community, it definitely doesn't help the people in it. And so this idea of criminalized sex work, that's part of what drives the demand for sex trafficking. Not making a moral judgment on on sex work, but it is the oldest profession. So what are we doing by criminalizing it other than driving it underground? So this idea of taking people out of a system that is bad is the general way I would say. But I'm going to talk more about it tomorrow, but my position is mostly to decriminalize things, especially facing marginalized communities, because our criminal legal system is meant to target people in marginalized communities, people who are poor, people of color, women who have been battered or abused. There's a pipeline, several different pipelines into the criminal legal system, and it's a bad one once you're inside.
If you have time for one more question.
Yes.
Tati or Keighly, there was one thing in particular that I was wondering about when you were both speaking, actually, and it's the expedited removal proceedings or process. I had heard about it maybe a year or two ago, and I was really interested in how, if you had any experience with it yourself, the expedited removal process and deportation proceedings. And to me, it kind of seems like a very clear example of a circumventing of due process, I guess you could say. And do you see that existing in areas that are backlogged more so than others, or when you work as a pro bono lawyer in order to represent people in deportation proceedings, does that prevent them from becoming a part of that process? Or, yeah, if you could speak on that.
Yes, I'm actually thrilled that you brought this up because, so expedited removal, just quick as a definition, it is essentially a fast-track deportation process. So if you are allowed to go into kind of the normal immigration court path, that means you'll have a chance to go before a judge, you'll have a right to an attorney at your own cost. There is no right to court-appointed counsel in immigration court, which is one of the other extreme inadequacies of the system, and that's regardless of your age, right? So that is what we think of as the traditional deportation process. There is some sort of law and order and due process where you'll have a chance to present any reason why you should stay, and there will be a decision, and there's an appeals process. However, there is this tool that DHS has called expedited removal, and that basically bypasses the court system altogether. You see no judge, you see no attorney. Any kind of low-level CBP, Customs Border Patrol, immigration officer can just sign a paper and have you deported, right? And that tool, horrifying as it was at least only used within, I think it was about 100 miles of the border, and for individuals who, and so that's any land border, and for individuals who had been here for less than 2 weeks. So let's say either border, northern or southern, if Border Patrol encounters somebody who entered maybe a week ago and they had managed to get through, the systems that were there, they could take that person and just automatically deport them without ever giving them a chance to see a judge. That's horrifying enough as it is. I remember last summer I was participating in a training, and at the end the panelists were asked, where do you see, what's the next horror, basically? What do you think we're going to be talking about as the big deal in summer 2019? And the last panelist said, I think that they are going to start using expedited removal in the interior. And everybody, they can't imagine that. I'll be damned if a day before that same training this year, the day before it was announced that they were going to start using expedited removal throughout the entire country. The timing, it really gave me chills. Not just the fact of the timing of it, but the fact that this was happening. So luckily there was subsequently federal litigation that put a temporary hold on it. We'll see how that shakes out. But if it's allowed to go into effect, this means that ICE, at any point, any immigration officer can stop anyone, anywhere in this country, at any time, for any reason, and basically it's on you to prove that you either have legal status or that you're not subject to expedited removal, because they had a bunch of kind of criteria of who it was going to apply to and who it wasn't. But yeah, absolutely. That was one of the biggest concerns, because you could have somebody who may be eligible for some form of relief, and maybe they just haven't gone to see an attorney yet, because the fear of finding out the options, if there are any, is sometimes too much to overcome. And that person could end up being deported to a country where they may face serious, serious harm. And yes, there were supposed to be some procedures and safeguards in place to avoid things like that, but the fact of the matter is that like many of the policies that have been rolled out by this administration, it was done so very quickly and without a lot of direction, such that the people who are on the ground actually administering the policies have no idea really what they're supposed to be doing, to whom and to when. So yes, expedited removal is terrifying, and the worst thing about it is that we are now facing the possibility of it being used as a tool throughout the country and not just limited to a smaller section of people who are coming in at the border.
Isaac, and then I will wrap up. Yeah.
Yes. I want to venture on the area of trafficking of human beings. Because in 2017, when I went to Kenya, I was approached by some human rights activists in the hotel in which I was residing, and they talked about young girls sold by some Kenyans as sex slaves. And the most vulnerable were street girls, young ones. And they told me they were sold in some rich countries. Well, there were so many, because in 2016, they told me 23,000 young girls had already been sold. Now, bear in mind that those who have that trade are some rich nations who buy these children. How would we go about challenging that issue, because these are powerful nations, and some of them they're able to give a challenge when being challenged, they can provide a counter challenge. How can we undergo it? Because not only in Kenya, I've also heard that this is going on in other countries. How can we go about it?
I think that's me. So, I mean, the question of transnational sex trafficking is a big problem. I think part of what, when we're talking about social media earlier, is awareness. The biggest challenge about human trafficking is lack of awareness. People think it's a problem happening in other places. They think it's a problem in Kenya. They don't think they don't think we're buying girls here in the U.S. And so I think creating a narrative around that to actually create awareness. And most people don't think that the United States is a hub for human trafficking, but it's the biggest in the world. So, and we're creating the demand, we're creating the profits, the billions of dollars are being enjoyed here. It's not being enjoyed in Kenya or Nepal or the Philippines. So I think what is wonderful about social media is that anyone can sort of shape the narrative, and so things become trending and all of that stuff, and it can be really obnoxious. Sometimes it's just cute girl dances to music, but it can also be really powerful things like Black Lives Matter that started with a hashtag, and queer Black women have never been recognized as leading any social movements ever before, and that was possible because of social media that's free. So I think narrative building through things that can be all around the world can be a good start for it.
I have one quick question. Do you know of, or have you ever spoken to IC officers? Or do you know of psychologists or people involved in the activism at the border knowing something about if there is a conversation going on within the enforcement, or it's a no-go, or I'm following orders is the justification of the Eichmann in Jerusalem. I'm following orders is the justification of the American Marine who was like the My Lai massacre. So I feel like separating children from their parents may not be like directly killing or raping or sending to the omens people, I think about that, engaging in that separation physically, that's psychologically challenging. Do you know of that kind of conversation within the enforcement?
I just want to add to that, because that's my question too, if you know of any acts of resistance, because there is, there's all this information now coming out of whistleblowers. It's really interesting for me to think about, institutionally, what people are doing. If you have access maybe to some of the narratives, have you been hearing things about particularly ICE officers, right, who may in fact be resisting on the inside and you won't hear about it for another 10 years, but have you heard anything like that? So just to pick up on Daniele's question.
So I think, interesting, each of these groups are unionized, right? So CBP, ICE, asylum officers, and even immigration judges. What I have understood from, and so it's difficult because a lot of them can't necessarily speak out individually, so they'll speak out through their representative. My understanding is that largely CBP and ICE have purportedly been largely supportive of the administration's policies, but what was most interesting about this year was the Union for Asylum Officers. So those are individuals who are at the border doing these credible fear screening, which is basically like the initial screening to see if you might have a valid claim for asylum, and then you get to go forward on to the next step. And then they're also adjudicating some of the claims, the full claims in the interior. They actually were speaking out publicly through their union about some of these policies, and that was an incredible step, and very, very heartening too, actually. But maybe on the scary side of that, I also mentioned that immigration judges are unionized, and the Department of Justice is actually trying to dismantle their union. And their union rep has often been very, very vocal about some of the policies I spoke about earlier, particularly the quotas and the pressure being placed on immigration judges and the politicizing of the immigration courts. So I think it's wonderful to see it. I'm also a little scared of what that's going to mean. Are they next going to try to dismantle the union for the asylum officers and silence that branch of it? So what happens if they do speak out and there is resistance? But although I have not had the pleasure of speaking with anyone who is an ICE officer about this, my hope remains in humanity, and a lot of that derives from the hope that my clients are able to maintain despite the horrors that they've been through, that there have to be, even just a few, who are troubled and frightened and horrified by what is happening. And I hope that even if we may not see it as much now, maybe that will eventually snowball in the same way that we saw with the asylum officers, where it just reached a breaking point and they had to speak out.
Well, Christina, you said yesterday that you're ready to still be hopeful. So that's I mean it when I say I get a lot of it from my clients, because it's hard to have hope in this world, but if they do, then I can.
When you are investigating and who is right or wrong, there is a one technique. I am the person of the mind science, a hypnotherapist. So there is a technique of hypnosis. After taking 3 or 4 sessions, after 1 hour, you can find out that the person is telling right or wrong, because you have to take him in the trance, and after that he can say that what is the real question. So it can help in this process of the investigating. So are they using the people of the mind science in this process?
I have no idea, but I would certainly be interested to hear any kind of psychoanalysis of the folks who are actively taking out these procedures.
I will say that, see, corrections officers in prisons and jails, which are often it's sort of fluid there, a lot of them see themselves as victims as well. They feel like they're locked up too, because this is the only job opportunity offered to them. They have to do it, and it sucks. They're getting terrible wages. It's a terrible job, so they feel like they're trapped as well. So it's not really like an ideological job. Let me go protect the public. It's more of I'm just doing what I have to do to support my family, support myself.
There's a parallel there. I've worked in the drafting field for 20 years now, and I mentioned to someone yesterday that I've come there's almost, I've come to a place where I empathize, not as much, but I empathize for traffickers in addition to those who have been trafficked. And the reason it's so big is bad, is it's many times that I've interacted with the traffickers that I was either exploited or being exploited. I didn't have any other economic opportunity. And so I literally distilled down to this horrific choice of being exploited or exploited. And I'm not saying that's all context at all, but I come across it enough to actually have empathy for some of the traffickers that I've engaged with, which is, I never thought I would have said that 20 years ago. It's bad, right? But there's so much gray, it's crazy.
I gotta say with black and white.
What's that?
I gotta say with black and white.
I wish I said.
Okay, join me thanking our panelists.